Ready? All right. All right. Well, welcome everybody to continuing legal education that is co-sponsored by Link Squares, the Association of Corporate Counsel Northeast Chapter, and by the New England Legal Foundation. My name is Dan Winslow. I am the president of the New England Legal Foundation. We're really happy that you're here joining us either live or later on video. Before we get started and introduce you to our panel today, I do want to just go over a few preliminary matters. The first is that through the New England Legal Foundation, we're actually offering 1 hour of CLE credit to the New England states outside of Massachusetts that have mandatory CLE requirements for lawyers. If you need to have CLE credit because of your attendance at this seminar, please shoot us an email, info@newenglandlegal.org, info@newenglandlegal.org with your name, contact information, your state, and your bar number, and we will send you the certification of your attendance based on the records here today. Today's topic is how GCs can enhance lawyer well-being on their team and why it matters. And in order to have a really good conversation about this, we're really excited that we've got 3 panelists in addition to me who are going to be joining us. We have on the far end of the table, retired Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts Justice Margot Botsford, and Justice Botsford asked us to address her as Margot today. So thank you, Margot, for joining us, and she'll get a bit more into her background in just a moment. We also have the chair of the Employment and Labor Group at the Boston law firm of Rubin and Rudman, Denise Murphy, and Denise is with us here today, and we're honored to have her. Margot was the chair of the SJC Standing Committee on the lawyer well-being, co-chair with Denise of the Lawyer Standing Committee, and Denise is one of the founding members as well. And to my immediate left is the current Chief Legal Officer of Link Squares, one of our sponsors today, as well as the, were you the founding GC at DraftKings?
I was.
Yeah, and the founding General Counsel at DraftKings, Tim Perilla. And Tim has a broad experience and is widely and highly regarded in the legal community of Boston. Now, we're talking about a lot of things that pertain to Massachusetts by way of example, but the topic crosses all state lines. The issue crosses all state lines, and that's why we feel that even though we'll be looking to and drawing upon examples from the Massachusetts experience, that all of the New England states, frankly, any state would be able to benefit, because the issues that we'll be talking about today really are common across many states and common, unfortunately, to the practice of law. And I'm really glad that we're going to be talking about it. So thank you for joining us. Without further ado, I wanted to just kick it over to Denise and to Margot, just to give us some background about how this issue of lawyer well-being sort of came to the fore, what put it on the radar, if you will, what was done in reaction to it becoming an issue, and what was the process to sort of get the whole conversation started here in Massachusetts?
Since Margot was at the very, very beginning with Chief Justice Gantz, I'll let you take that part.
Okay, thank you. I would just want to say that one of the people who was in this program and is General Counsel of Northeastern University is co-chair at the moment of the Lawyer Wellbeing Committee.
Wonderful. Well,
That's
thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, out there in the ether, but thank you for joining us. And by all means, I meant to say to folks that if you have a question, just put it into the chat and we'll read it out and we'll be able to speak to it as well. So you can shape this conversation as well during the course of the discussion. Margot.
So, thank you. The way that this started was that in 2017, there was published a nationwide study of lawyer well-being in the United States based on surveys of lawyers in every state and also law students. So it combined the two. And the report issued in 2017 outlined how lawyers and law students, but I'm going to focus on lawyers, had higher rates of depression, anxiety, substance use disorder, alcohol disorder, specifically, than the general population by 10% or so above. So it's like 28% to 30. I didn't get my numbers wrong.
But statistically significant.
Significant higher. And so the study looked then at various lawyer communities, law firms, law students, public practice, different sizes of law firms, and really had recommendations and judicial for all of them. And one of the recommendations of the general report was that every chief justice in all the states, because the highest court in the state is who regulates lawyers in that state, every chief justice and appoint a committee to really look at lawyer well-being issues in that particular state. And many states did, and we did. So in 2018, the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts set up a steering committee to look at lawyer well-being here in Massachusetts. It was one of many. And so both Denise and I were on the steering committee, and Mary Strother was also. And we basically divided up into practice areas. So we had large law firms, solo practitioners, public lawyers, judiciary, in-house counsel,
Bar
bar
association.
associations, and other groups, I think. And each of them created a steering committee of practitioners in that area. And they each did a report. And so at the end of a year, we published a report that had recommendations and included these separate reports of all the practice areas. And one of the recommendations was that the state Supreme Court set up a standing committee for lawyer well-being that would carry out the recommendations of this report and deal with and try to help lawyer well-being on an ongoing basis, which the Supreme Judicial Court did set up in 2019. And again, the three people I've mentioned, Denise, myself, and Mary Strother, were on that standing committee and are on that standing committee. It seems to be perpetual at the moment. In any event, so we started working. We had one meeting in person, and then COVID hit in March of 2020. And so we've been meeting by Zoom ever since then in the last 3 years. And we hired, we've done a lot of work, and really the main focus starting out and has continued has really been on solo practitioners, because here in this state, that is the largest percentage of lawyers are in solo or very small firm practitioners. And one of the big issues is actually economic. How can they pay their bills? How can they get health care? How can they get mentoring? So we've been working on all of those aspects in practice. And as I said to everybody here, we had, as I mentioned, on the steering committee, we had in-house counsel from Emerson College, or University College, I think it is, and she was great, and they did a report. But in the standing committee, we don't have corporate counsel represented, and I think that is a great weakness, and we need to do that. So I'm hoping that people will think about that and see if you want to join our effort. But in any event, we do have a standing committee, and we have a wonderful executive director, and there's a fabulous website that I would recommend people look at, because it's got all sorts of resources on it. And it is, I'm going to give you the site if I can. Well, it's lawyer wellbeing ma.org.
Lawyerwellbeingma.org?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it has all sorts of resources. One of the ones that we are still working on that I think in this state is got enormous promise is a statewide online mentoring program. So you can sign up to be either a mentor or a mentee, and you can. It's like speed dating. You can meet and if you have a particular legal problem that you want advice on, or a kind of practice area that you're interested in pursuing, or whatever. And I just think that offers a lot of help. At first, we thought it was really for solo practitioners because they don't, but actually a lot of people use it because they don't want to ask in their own particular employment place for advice, and so they go outside.
That's great.
And I think that has turned out really well.
And by the way, I saw Mary Strother posted the website on the chat. So thank you, Mary, for doing that.
Thanks, Mary.
It's very helpful for doing that. Thank you.
So we've done things like that, and various other committees are looking at issues, and this is, I know this isn't your concern at all, but one of the big problems in our state is for getting representation for indigent clients. And there are staff lawyers that get paid, but a lot of people do this on an hourly basis. And staff who work, as you probably know, for public agencies or a lot of nonprofits can get their student loans forgiven over time. That is not true if you do it on an hourly basis. But right now, we think we've managed to make a dent
Very
in
close.
Washington, so that we can probably start getting that kind of ability to get your loans deferred if you work, let's say, 30 hours a week doing nothing but pro bono, representation of the, I don't mean pro bono, but representing indigent criminal clients.
Right.
So it's that kind of practical work that we're doing, as well as more trying to deal with particular issues like stigma and trying to broadcast how pervasive the stigma of seeking help when you need it for a variety of issues.
Could you speak to that,
There's-
the
there's-
challenge of stigma and
There's
seeking?
2 points I'd like to make. One is about the mentoring program. When we first published our report and we had our initial meetings, I learned for the first time about the difficulty that people from underrepresented populations experience in a traditional mentoring project. That is, they are assigned a mentor, and as one woman put it, there's no way that a middle-aged white guy is going to understand what it's like for me to live in my community and take care of my children and still try to be effective at work. So that kind of mentoring relationship just doesn't work. It fails from the inception. So the program that we've established, it offers people to use multiple mentors, not just one, and they get to choose them. And it's either because it fits well, or because they want to ask that person that question at that time. And it just makes sense, because the traditional models don't always fit. That's one thing. And as far as the stigma goes, in the MBA's task force report, as part of the steering committee's task force, I was astounded to realize how many, especially litigators, would not say to their adversaries, I can't get you these answers to interrogatories because my kid has the flu, or I have breast cancer and I'm about to go under treatment. They would not say that because they are afraid that their adversaries would take advantage of their weakness and use that to their unfair advantage. And that was pervasive. And that's still true. I mean, that is that stigma of saying, I am not perfect. Because in our jobs as lawyers, everybody comes to us with their problems. We are perceived to be the person who can fix everything. And they're the ones, we are in our communities. I mean, how many times has anyone here in this audience had a call in the middle of the night from your son's best friend's mother-in-law twice removed and said, I have a problem. The police are knocking at my door. That happens to us. And what do? We get up and we deal with it. But that leaves us tired. That leaves us exhausted. Where do we go? Because if we show weakness, we diminish the perception that the public has. And, as bad as it sounds, people want bulldogs. They want somebody who's going to tear out their throat. That's not reality in a legal community. That's not reality anywhere, nor should it be. And it's a small world. And if you're a bulldog, karma comes and gets you.
Yeah.
But they don't know that. And that is the perception that the public at large has of us. So for us to be anything less than that takes away, adversely impacts our financial ability to support our family. It very well may impact our standing in our firms, in our legal community. Saying that I have depression is going to make people look at you just a little bit differently in courtroom. Say, Your Honor, can you excuse me for a moment? I need to use the restroom. Simple, something like that, let alone nurse. Completely different perception. And judges still are not that welcoming to those kinds of interruptions.
Yeah.
As much as we've gotten. And that's the work that we're facing. That's the stigma of saying, I'm not perfect.
Yeah. I'd like to hear from Tim in a minute just about some in-house tips as a leader, but I want to pull on this a bit more, Denise. Identifying stigmas, identifying some of these examples that have caused stress, this fear of not seeming that you don't appear weak to opposing counsel, for example, or, if you're the judge, you want to keep the case moving because you've got the jurors in the box or whatever the pressures are. Has the committee gone so far as to start to identify best practices or pointers or suggestions for ways to improve lawyer well-being?
We have. It's on our website. We have reports talking about cultural changes and examples and what we're trying to do. One of the very best things I think that we did as a committee is to conduct listening tours and go and talk to what we see as underrepresented groups, or just including law students, and just listen and hear what they had to say. And that was astounding. The reports were really heartbreaking when you had to accept the fact that people of color still have to use two different types of identification to go into a courthouse when I wouldn't. When there's an assumption that a woman goes into a courtroom and there's expectation that she's the stenographer, or worse, if you're there with your client and they expect that you're the defendant. It's despite how you're retired, that is the expectation. That's still there.
I'm curious when and I take the reasoning why underrepresented witnesses or points of view were considered. Was there also a solicitation of, folks that look like me, the folks that also go through increased alcoholism or drug use or domestic challenges? So the entirety, like the cross-section.
Absolutely. And that's actually one of the very first things that we did in the steering committee and the task force reports, was listening to everyone's voices. And it was done deliberately that way. And it wasn't done specifically scientifically. It was more anecdotally. But since then, we have developed a much more systemic approach. The University of Chicago NORC study, and everyone who has taken and re-registered for the bar has had to fill out the demographic survey. Because one of the things that we realized is that we didn't know who we were, where we were, and what we were doing. And until that, we couldn't really try to figure out how we can offer resources to them. Mm-hmm. And that's what that demographic survey does.
So the website itself is a great source of resources, but for the benefit of our audience here today, would you mind just giving a couple of highlights of a few of the recommendations that the standing committee has promulgated so far, and maybe some thoughts about how, for example, the SOB litigator, is that a rules-based thing or a training-based thing? But just some examples of things that you have seen that the committee's identified as maybe points of solution.
Not as many as I would like. Let me start there.
Yep.
I do think, and this is just one of the things you just said, raised it for me, and I can't speak for the corporate culture, but one of the completely still unsolved issues for litigating lawyers is the problem of the SOB litigator, and and its direct impact to well-being. You couldn't have a closer connection, and it seems. I don't know why we can't seem to do a better job at getting to address that, because it's like as night follows day, if people would be nicer to each other, they'd actually be happier and solve more problems. So as I say, I can't speak to your culture, whether when you are in a transaction, whether that kind of working with lawyers on the other, or another company or another whatever, is an issue the same way it is for litigators. I would be interested to know what you say.
There's some interesting solutions. I mean, I heard one transactional lawyer who was having a really difficult time with an SOB transactional lawyer on the other side. So the fellow who was on the receiving end of the nastiness, his company just bought the other company and solved it. It's a big problem solved.
It's an expensive.
Okay.
Yeah, it's expensive to hire.
Whatever it takes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, so it does seem to me, I think that's, well, I speak from a background as being in court, so I can't really speak to your background, but I do think that it's so hard to lose this image of lawyers, not only as problem solvers, as Denise was talking about, but as the advocate, the standard bearer who's gonna fight the other side.
Gladiator.
The gladiator, yeah.
And all about-
Yeah.
It just, to me, that is the, I'm gonna get my metaphors mixed, but it's sort of the Achilles heel of our work in that we have not come to, I think, any effective way of dealing with that. I would say, though, with respect to solutions, that my sense is that one of the best ways to get at it is at a kind of molecular level, in the sense of not global solutions, but you have an entity, a particular employment situation, where the people who all work there know not only each other, but they know what the issues are that are really driving them nuts, and listening to them and getting them empowered to share that information and then dealing with it. Because one of the lessons that Denise referred to when we were talking yesterday, was it? Yeah, but the clear directive in all of this well-being work is that the change has to come from the top. It is not a bottom-up process at all.
That's a great segue to you. As a chief legal officer, people manager, if you can share some of your experiences about lawyer well-being on your team, and then particularly if there's anything that lessons learned that you can impart. And I have a few of my own that I learned the hard way that I'd love to share with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Margo, to address directly, like the level of combativeness, I think it's probably not that dissimilar to what you see in court. You definitely run into those people who are looking at the situation as a win-lose.
Yeah.
And typically that's not the most constructive way to go into the beginnings of a business relationship between two companies, right? Although I do understand that there are certain points that you have to argue, and you have to argue, very well, right? They're important to your organization. And so standing firm on that is fine, but I think there's the ability to be civil and also make your point, and come to a strong solution.
I think if you're going 110 miles an hour on every point in the deal,
Yeah.
you lose the value of the three things you really care about.
That's
Now,
right.
maybe you're trying to mask those three things. There might be some negotiating strategy there,
That's right.
but you actually lose the effectiveness. And where do you, if you're already doing 110 miles an hour, how much farther can you go?
Yeah.
So we need to draw the line, because that's how deals get killed.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the deal killing department. You want to be the deal making department. You're illegal.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There's, I think, because the tone is set from the top, I think the GCs and CLOs have really a phenomenal opportunity. And that's why we wanted to have this conversation. I thank everybody for joining us today. But GCs and CLOs are incredibly well positioned to make meaningful changes. And some of the things are unique to us. So, for example, when I was at GC, the tech company in Silicon Valley, something that's new to us, different from law practices, quarter end. You know, we're coming up now to the end of June, and I promise you, everybody who's in-house right now is painfully aware.
It's a big
We're
quarter.
coming- It's a big quarter coming up here, and so there's pressures that happen. You know, and that's just the nature of the business. That's the nature of the deal cycle. But as the GC or as the CLO, you can actually help do other things to take some of that pressure off. So, for example, you know, with remote work and so much remote work happening, how do you unplug? How do you unplug? And so, one thing that I've seen work with success is what we called real PTO. And to say, when you're on PTO, you are offline. In fact, I would growl at people when they would come online and say, no, you turn on, don't get on email. You got to walk away from it. You got to set it down. And, you know, our view was, hey, listen, there's some crisis and somebody was, you know, sole source, we'll call you. But if we're not calling you, please, you know, enjoy another pina colada and just decompress. And you have to do that. And the part of the reason is your productivity of your team actually improves if you give people a chance to unplug, to unwind, to decompress. And you have to do it.
Yeah,
And as general counsel, you have the power to do that with your outside law firms.
Yep.
You know,
Absolutely.
don't call them in the middle of the night and expect an answer at 2:00 in the morning. Let them have a weekend.
Yeah.
If they're on vacation, let them have a weekend, you know, let them be on vacation.
Yeah.
That clients' demands are such an integral part of attorney pressure and anxiety.
You know, it's a great point, Denise. I think though for outside counsel, there has to be communication. And communication is the key to all of this.
Mhm.
So, you know, if your outside counsel is going on a planned vacation, please tell us in advance.
Mhm.
Give us like a couple weeks notice. That way, we can wrap up, we can wrap it up because then we know.
Keys
But
communication.
if the first time that we find out that somebody's on PTO from outside counsel is on the Tuesday that we had some crisis, we reach out and say, oh, you know, Sally's not here. You know, it's a problem. It creates stress on our side too.
Yeah.
The other thing that and this is a lesson I've learned, and it's not just unique to law, but it's a good management tool. The most underutilized tool in a manager's toolbox is gratitude.
Yeah.
It's to say thank you, you know,
Yes.
and people will go through walls for you. They really will. People will just, you know, I've been so impressed by the dedication of teams that they buy into the company's mission and the getting to the quarter and we'll die on the hill with sales and all that. But man, say thank you. When somebody, and not just false gratitude, but when somebody really just crushes it, call them out. Like certainly call them directly and let them know. You know? And the flip side to that is never call somebody out in front of a group. I'll always have those conversations privately.
Yeah.
And I'm always astounded. Maybe you've seen this in your past, but I was always astounded when somebody would be like publicly dressed down.
Yeah.
And as the leaders, the GC don't
Even
just,
within the team.
yeah, just be mindful.
Yeah.
GCs don't understand the magnitude that your voice as a legal leader is magnified. What you might not think is of consequence is massively consequential to your team.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that every organization, again, speaking of the courts, but it's true of every organization, there's a sort of natural sense of there's a hierarchy here and and there's the top up there. And when the top does something like that, it's just death all the way down.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether it's what organization, everybody's looking up.
Which goes along with the idea of solutions. Solutions, it's having that person at the top be vulnerable, for example, if they need to, if they're not well. And they say, I'm going to take this time, I'm going to take a leave because I'm undergoing, actually say the words, I'm undergoing treatment for cancer.
Right.
Say those. That destigmatizes it. It also shows a vulnerability that you don't actually ever expect from CEO or CLO. You know,
Right.
you just don't get it. But to have somebody say that, or to say it more, well, probably a greater stigma has to do with mental health issues.
Yeah.
To have somebody come forward, a prominent member of your community come forward, as we did, and we've been doing in our bar association work and in our other work, is to have people who are highly successful people say, I'm in recovery and have been for so long. I've suffered from anxiety and depression, and I am a bar president. You know, having people being that vulnerable and saying it out in public to a large audience enables a conversation for other people.
I think it's also true of your family members. In other words, if you've got children who have mental health issues, maybe they're hospitalized, maybe, I mean, whatever. Talking about that, if you're a leader, it just has such a value for everybody else, because everybody has children that have issues.
And maybe it would work at scale, I suppose. If you have 10,000 employees, you can't have an open door policy directly to the GC or the CLO. But if you have 100 employees, you could. You have 200 employees, you certainly could. And to just make sure people understand, as the GC or the CLO, that you do have an open door policy. And if it's not you, then somebody who you've delegated, somebody's been like 5 open doors below you or something, if it's a big, huge organization. But the idea is to say, look, you can talk to us. Sometimes just venting, sometimes just getting it off your chest can have hugely curative effects for somebody who's up against some serious pressure. And the other sort of flip side to that is, as the GC and the CLO setting the tone, don't let people hear the quarter end bad reviews and be surprised when they get their bonus check. A lot of companies have quarter driven bonuses. And so you never want to be surprised when you're getting your quarter. Like, if something was wrong or not to expectation, you got to share that in real time, I think, don't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, when I think about how to look out for, so kind of a recurring theme here is like, all right, how do you focus on yourself, right? How do you make sure your mental well-being is where it needs to be? And that comes in, in terms of setting boundaries, really taking vacation, unplugging, all of that. But then you think about, all right, you are responsible for a team here, and you're responsible for it as a GC in ways that probably most first-time GCs don't think about. And I would argue, probably many law firm lawyers probably don't think about either. So like, you are directly responsible, and you're kind of the only person responsible for assisting people through their career path. Right. Like, granted, yes, partnership at a law firm, but when you think about it, like in practice, in-house, so little of that success goes to your legal abilities. And what I mean by that is, to be here, you have to possess a minimal level of skill. And you're not going to get to the next level unless you've been trained accordingly and reach that next. So that's fine. Like, as a lawyer, lawyers are pretty good at doing lawyer stuff, right? In an organization where you really start to see the ability to career path for people, the ability to have your staff have purpose, for like internal purpose. Like, most lawyers are also pretty career driven, and they take a sense of pride in where they've gone in their career. And so, and they evaluate opportunities with what, not only what is this job, what's the next job for me? How is this preparing me? All of that. You're responsible for all of that, and you're responsible for communicating it, and you're responsible for sort of setting up that structure in a way that's clearly understood across the board, in a way that's equitable for all of the folks in your department, just as much for a corporate attorney as it is for your IP attorney, as it is for your commercial transactions attorney, right? All of them should have an opportunity at the general counsel seat, right? Based on the structure of the company and the needs that are met. Outside of the legal function, though, so much of your ability to advance is the way that the rest of the organization views you, right? Are you able to go beyond the law to understand the person who's coming to you with an issue, right? If you're product counsel, do you really understand your customer and what you're selling to them? Your IP, and maybe you're doing patent harvesting or something like that, and within your organization, do you speak the same language of the developers or the engineers that you're working with? And can you understand the real context of what you're doing? And I think that as a GC, that's actually the part that you have to teach most. And as a
you can
staff,
facilitate it though too. You can make it happen too.
and as a staff attorney, that's the part that you can control the least, that adds the most amount of negative mental stress to your role. Right. You're like, I've done everything right from a legal perspective. I've always been, given great advice. My managers have told me what great advice I have, and I just can't get ahead here. Right. And I feel like they're slamming
Can I add to
their head
that
against the wall.
too? One of the things that the committee report indicated and this is true, it's true for in-house counsel very much so, and every type of organization. Giving management training to
Yes.
people, because it gives a sense not only of ownership in the entity, but a sense of agency, that they know what to do to manage a situation or manage people. And it's, I think, the direction, I mean, the connection between feeling confident as a manager or beginning to be confident as a manager and seeing yourself move up is obvious. And I don't think that organizations, I can again speak of the public sector, I don't think they think about that enough.
That's a great point. And, people sometimes become people managers by virtue of their seniority or a circumstance, but there's no training that comes with it. Managing people, and this goes to the consequence of if you get it wrong, bad things happen for people's well-being. But to be a people manager is a particular set of skills. This is like cooking. If you can read, you can cook. You just have to know the recipe. But if you've never had the opportunity to be trained, and I'd say for GCs and CLOs, the best resource that you have is probably your own HR department, because HR people come to their jobs and their roles as people management people. Like, so what is progressive discipline? What is a PIP, for example? And the idea is to be clear about what the expectation is and to help people have the resources to get them to meet that expectation and to give constructive feedback and guide them if they fall short. And ultimately, if it's not working out, sometimes it doesn't work out, but you have to have that level of communication and dialogue. And you can't do that just by being frustrated as a people manager. Like, the worst thing that can happen to you as a legal people manager is to let the pressure build up and build up and build up, and then it's finally explode, that you're not handling it correctly. And it's bad for you, it's bad for your staff.
But it's directly connected to individual well-being, because I think the point that
It
you
is.
make is, I think this is true of almost all lawyers. Your identity is so tied up with what you're doing, so tied up. And so if you feel like you are respected at work and you have a chance to grow, and what you do well is being rewarded. I'm not talking about even economically, just it's being appreciated. It means everything to somebody.
Right. And money is not actually the number one consideration for happiness in your job. It's up there, but it's not number one. People will stay in a position that they could make money elsewhere, more money, but they have other non-monetary factors. I was curious, what do you think about this? I think for lawyers, titles matter. Your sense of professional progress matters. And so, the business units aren't as necessarily attuned to, well, you've got, associate corporate counsel, senior counsel, manager, like this sort of progression. And, titles don't cost us anything.
Right.
They just don't, but titles matter to lawyers. I've learned this.
Yes.
But do you share the same view?
Yeah, so my philosophy on titling in an in-house environment is so I don't have the general counsel title. My vice president of legal, who largely runs our legal function day in and day out, he does not have a general counsel title. And the main reason is because I've been in organizations where and have worked with a number of attorneys where you become the general counsel because you maybe were the first person who was hired. And you look at the level and maybe this person is leveled as a director level in the organization. You've got senior director, VP, SVP at C level. Whereas the general counsel, I think, title used to denote an executive level position. And I'm not sure that it does so much now. And so what that does within an organization, though, is when that director level person has a general counsel title, goes and sits down with the SVP of whatever, the SVP is like, so where exactly do you sit? And do I have to listen to you? And does it matter?
The hierarchy, these sort of the
That's
corporate hierarchy.
That's exactly it.
Mhm.
And now you're looking at an environment where you have somebody like right or wrong questioning, questioning that level of authority that either one has. And then what you eliminate is the opportunity for the general counsel to immediately identify with the general counsel's peer group. So for example, we have our senior leadership team here, which is functional heads for each department, right? And so you look around and overwhelmingly the majority of those people are vice president level. There are some that are at senior director level. And so you look at that, and I've talked to, so I oversee legal, IT, operations, and HR. And I have VPs that sit on each of those 4 functions. And I'm like, who is your peer group? Is it the IT team? Is it the legal team? It's not. It's your other VPs around the organization. If you want to be effective as an attorney in an organization, you need to build that peer group across the organization, or else you'll never get the perspective that you need to understand how to be effective in the business.
So you think it's actually good to sort of pair a business title along with a legal title? So vice president or vice president of whatever.
Yeah,
Interesting.
exactly. And I've got some former colleagues and other friends in the community that are getting into their first GC gig, right? Their first like head of legal gig and their first CLO gigs. And you talk to the head of legal and say, what's your level? And the first GC, and what's your level? And the CLO, and what's your level and your influence around. And those oftentimes are not the same. And what it ends up coming to is like, oh, you can have the general counsel title, but you're going to be a director level. Like, this is not an interesting thing. It becomes a GC in name only. Right.
It's interesting. I agree with that, by the way. The other thing is, I think as a GC and a CLO, is that you're uniquely positioned to be an advocate for your own team, to be an advocate for your department. You want to show value add, of course, but to the individual level as well, be an advocate for your people. So listen, we understand sales has different pressures than legal. Sometimes legal are the folks that say, hey, long-term interest in the company, not so good for that deal, right? And somebody, you can't just let, a junior lawyer be going up against a sales SVP, one-on-one. You have to be an advocate for your own staff, but then also for the broader function of legal itself. And who but the GC or the CLO to do that? And the thing is that sort of the ripple effect of, it's oftentimes healthy tension, but sometimes not so healthy tension between the different functions, because everybody has a different function, a different role, is that the GC CLO is actually positioned to be able to sort of smooth things over, I think, a bit. And I think you have to for the benefit.
Yeah.
Especially in the legal field and in HR, because typically when there's a downturn, those are often the first parts to be eliminated. And they're the most crucial parts to get you through those things.
Yeah.
And, there's still a perception that they're babysitters.
Yeah.
The legal team and the HR teams, they're babysitters. They just take care of the human emotions. Well, that's what a company is. And the more disastrous deals I've seen, from an employment lawyer's perspective, are the ones where we have freaking talented people who can manage this and can also manage the people who are in legal and in HR.
That's absolutely right. And what I think for, we've got, how can GCs enhance well-being, lawyer well-being on their teams? I think generally, how can GCs contribute to the well-being of the broader organization? One of the questions, so we did a similar conversation yesterday with the Tech GC group. One of the great questions that came through was, I have a CEO who doesn't believe in vacation time. So we top out at 15 days and you earn it over time and it's 0. And my response was, what kind of talent is coming into your tech company with that?
It's not a great recruiting
Not
tool.
a great recruiting tool. And
it's terrible for well-being.
Yeah.
Just once you get there, why are you going to stay?
that's exactly it. And ultimately my response was this. It's like, your CEO cannot believe in vacation all day long, but your CEO absolutely better believe in the success of the company, right? This is an economic decision. You're going to end up you're going to destroy your eligible pool of candidates, right? Because anyone who's really good is not going to settle for a below market package, right? I mean, vacation time is a benefit, just like health insurance, right? So you're not going to get the best talent, which means you're not going to have the best output, which means you're not going to have the best bottom line, which means you're not going to have the best business, right? And you're going to have higher turnover, and it costs a whole lot to replace people
Oh, yeah.
than a whole lot more to replace people than it
So
does
it's
to keep them
at least
happy.
it's 3x.
Yeah.
And then you lose the efficiency, the output in the meantime as you're ramping somebody else up.
I
Yeah.
Yeah.
do think also on that point that for whatever the enterprise is, and it was really working on this my well-being generally. What all the studies show, I'm just on vacation, is if you don't take vacation and make yourself take vacation and make your people who work for you take vacation, the end result is not pretty. It just isn't.
Right.
I think lawyers in particular resist that because this image of working is that's how I show my values, but work. But it's just been shown to be so not true. And I think, and again, that's the kind of thing where you have to have a CEO that takes that attitude is just a recipe for disaster.
Yes.
It's got to be up at the top and long down.
So we're down to the last 10 minutes, believe it or not. So I wanted to pivot to one other thing, and there's some other topics as well. But as a GC CLO, you'll have visibility into your team. Let's talk about the scenario where somebody's clearly in crisis. They may not even know that they're in crisis. I've had the experience of actually seeing people who are like in significant mental crisis, and they were such that they didn't even know they were in crisis, or substance abuse, or alcohol use disorder, whatever it is that's triggered, or something with their family members, the same thing, which is clearly affecting them. So as a CLO, as a GC, you often have visibility into your teams. So if you become aware of a situation, what's a way that a GC or CLO can approach that? What should they approach that in your view?
I think the first place to go is to meet with HR to get advice about how to do it. But I think the sooner you can connect to that person and figure out a way to get to that issue, the better off.
It's a double-edged sword to do that, to approach people from an employment law perspective, because even if there's nothing going on and you assume they are, if you perceive them to have a disability, that puts them into protected class, which is always worrisome. I would take that risk and defend that suit based upon the objective facts that would be before me now. If I saw somebody who's in crisis, or somebody who substantially appears to be impaired, you smell alcohol, you smell weed, you smell that on them, or you notice a complete and total change in their behavior, or big trick, being out on Monday and Friday, always calling out on Mondays and Fridays. Those are signs. And I think the best thing you can do is to address it directly, but in partnership with HR. Rule number one, never have a direct conversation by yourself with anyone.
Oh, so do I have somebody from HR in the room?
Yes,
Or
somebody else. Yes,
Yeah.
always for a couple of reasons. One, it's a witness. Two, it's protection.
Yeah.
Because you are actually making statements about someone's core being and the extent to which they've tried to hide that is significant.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you don't know how they're going to react.
If they're in denial or something, yeah.
Or violent.
I found, most frequently, I guess, what I found is overwork, right? Like when people, and I think this happens a lot in law enforcement too, like people just come off of something really challenging. Maybe it's really adversarial negotiation and then just kind of pull up in a meeting that like in a normal circumstance should be okay. And the business is like, what on earth was that? It's like, well, you don't know that like so-and-so just had probably one of the worst conversations and just dealt with one of the worst situations that person has had to deal with in their entire professional career, right? So so when I see things like that happen, when I see, people go through some really challenging times, I will approach them directly and say, listen, like that was tough. Why don't you just like close the laptop, go like if you need to go for a 30-minute walk, go for a 30-minute walk. If you need to go for the rest of the week off, go for the rest of the week off. Because you've got to get in the right headspace. And the way you're acting right now, you are not in the right headspace to have this conversation. It's stress. It happens to us all. I get it. And then
That empathy, though, see, I think that empathy is key. So
From the top.
it happens
Yeah.
to us all. It happens to me, it happens to you. So
Yeah.
I've been there, I've walked in your shoes. I'm worried about you. You know, that kind of a thing. So
Yeah.
to engage. not to-
I do think that in an organization, it's really important for all of these things to somehow have a way of generally putting this on the table that I mean, the concept of well-being, but I mean, breaking that out, what, you know, sort of trying to get underneath what that means and that you care about that, the top cares about that. And, you know, we are really trying to address it in our entity. I mean, so that it isn't just the GC talking to other GCs about how did you handle X situation, but all the people that work in that setting know that there is an understanding and a willingness to accept that everybody has problems and that we work together to solve them.
You know, I think team building, you know, and I know it got a little bit forced during COVID because we had no choice, but, you know, I think there still is value. And on sales, for example, you know, they'll have like the sales kickoff or the sales club or whatever the organization uses to reward sales that you hit your numbers. But that's an investment in sales because it creates team, creates, you know, this wonderful bond and energy. I think the same is true for legal. Legal is not on the revenue side, but we're an investment by the company in a deal. We're an investment in the operation. And so it's important to augment, to get the best value out of that investment by periodically saying, hey, look, we're gonna have an offsite for legal. Or, you know, I would oftentimes do it as part of the ACC. So it's a shout out to the folks at the ACC. It's like we would have our global legal meeting at the ACC annual conference. There'd be tons of CLE, which is fantastic, but time for dinner, time to meet people, time to just meet your colleagues and spend some downtime with each other. Really hugely valuable.
But the point I'm making is
Yeah.
yes, but sort of adding into that an explicit recognition that we are here for you
Yeah.
when you know you have a crisis that's going to affect your performance.
And I think the time to say that is when there's not a crisis happening.
Exactly.
Just during a team meeting,
Exactly.
say, hey, just want to let you know, this is how we roll. So, you know, the job is the job and your life and your health is paramount. And people have to know that.
Mhm.
And if you ever get to a point where you need to tap out, you just let us know. You have to let us know. And it's okay. We've done this.
one of the questions I have, so I've never worked at a law firm for better or worse. Probably a little bit of both, I'd imagine. And I've had to make a lot of stuff up and, you know, over the years, but when you think about, you know, the pressure for build hours, right? It's not that different than a sales team that's commission based, right? And, you know, you tell people, oh, focus on your well-being, focus on your well-being. Well,
Right.
guess what? That's great that I have 5 weeks of vacation per year. But if I have to bill 2,600 hours this year, there's no way I get that done and take 5 weeks of vacation.
You know, I just on that point, one of the things that the recommendation was made again and again, but with respect to law firms, the worst aspect of law firms in terms of your lawyer's well-being is the minimum billable hours to get
Yeah.
a bonus or whatever. We can't get them to change. We just we can't.
It's how
But you
it's how they make
You
money.
can't.
But you can,
Yeah, exactly.
general counsel,
Yes.
you're uniquely qualified to do that, to set boundaries.
Yeah.
You want to see their policies, you want to see how they do that. You can do that because if they want you as a client, they'll do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
that's a great
Absolutely
point.
right.
So
Great point.
the GCs have impact even into the legal community brought.
Dramatically so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
those of us who go out and try to do rainmaking and bring in clients, we try, at least to my firm, we certainly try to talk about our balance and the women who are in power and our recruiting and diverse underrepresented areas. We talk about that. That is a
Yeah.
selling point. and
Absolutely.
for recruitment and retention, not just clients.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's interesting, you know, and I think the same true as well as the teams that are put on the field by outside counsel.
Mhm.
So the GC or the head of litigation, depending on who's running the show for that particular project or that case or that deal, has the ability to try to shape the team. You can shape the team. I mean, I don't even try. You can shape the team.
You absolutely
You
can.
know,
Yeah.
and I say for GCs, you know, as a former GC, it's important for us that when we have a presence in public, because, you know, law is a public function, especially trial, we would like to have, you know, excellent lawyers for sure, but excellent lawyers that reflect who we are as a company as well, our values as well.
That's right. So I think we're running up close on time, right, Dan?
Yeah, we're just got one more minute to
Um,
wrap up. If folks have in the chat, if you'd like to ask any questions, we'll just take another minute or two. We started at 4:02, so we'll go to 5:02 to have the full hour of CLE.
That's perfect.
Fine
And
with me.
Paula had asked, could you please repeat the details for getting the CLE certification? And also, do you report for us?
Yes, so you can send an email to tell us your name, your contact information, and your state, as well as your bar number to info@newenglandlegal.org, info@newenglandlegal.org. And we will send you every state's different, so it just depends on which of the states that you're applying for. We're on record with Rhode Island now. Different states, the lawyers carry the burden of reporting or not. So just tell us what you need us to do and we'll make sure it gets done.
And I just put that email
Oh, great.
address
Yeah,
in the chat.
thank you, Tim.
Yep.
Any other questions in the chat so far?
No, I think that was it in the chat. I mean, one other aspect that I think may be interesting to get everyone's opinion on is if there were one benefit that you do for yourself to like maintain or one benefit or one activity, one thing that you do to maintain your own mental health in, you know, in whatever position you're in or where you've been throughout your careers, what do you do? What do you do to maintain your sanity?
She swims.
I do swim, but I would say my number one is to develop close friendships. And I have in my work community, in my home community, my friends. And my very cute husband.
Yeah. And he's also your friend.
Yes, he is.
I think on a daily basis, it does seem to me that getting outside, it makes a huge difference of just stepping away and walking or whatever, but just, yeah, clearing the head.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so for me, I live in Cape Cod, in Truro, and a really good day for me is a really bad day for fish. And so it's sort of a balance. I like to get out on the water and the beach and just to smell the sea air.
Yeah, for me, I like to walk. Same thing, like get outside. I now have a dog, which makes walking the dog one thing that's different. It can be an adventure at times, but that's great. But like a true de-stress, like even if I have an extra 15 minutes, I'll walk around here. Even go right down toward the water. Right, we're a 3-minute walk from from
I'll
the
be
harbor.
fishing.
Yeah, exactly. I go meet up with Dan, ask him how the fish are biting. But that's big for me to get out and enjoy it, even if it's cold.
Well, I want to thank you, Margot Botsford, formerly of the Supreme Judicial Court, now retired. Denise Murphy from the law firm of Rubin and Rudman and Boston, Tim Perilla from our sponsor, Link Squares, Dan Winslow for the New England Legal Foundation, and also want to thank the ACC Northeast chapter for co-sponsoring us, and thank all of you for joining us here today. And we hope that you've picked up some helpful tips and that your well-being and the well-being of you and your teams is improved in some way by our work today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.